The massive chamber buzzed with voices from dozens of different species. Commander Taman sat quietly at the human table, watching as representatives from across the galaxy argued about the war. The Void Swarm had destroyed 12 star systems in the past month. Everyone was scared, and everyone had opinions about how to fight back. The Chitauri delegate clicked his mandibles rapidly as he spoke. His insect-like body gleamed under the station lights. Our hive mind generals can process battle data faster than any individual consciousness. We have already calculated 17,000 possible attack patterns. A crystalline being from the Luminous Empire pulsed with bright blue light. Your calculations mean nothing without proper firepower. Our energy warriors can destroy entire swarm clusters with a single focused beam. The Saurian representative hissed softly. His scaled head swayed as he spoke in a voice like grinding stone. Brute force and clever thinking are useless without proper hunting instincts. Our apex predators have been killing dangerous prey for millions of years. They know how to track and eliminate threats. Taman listened to it all without saying much. The human delegation was small compared to the others. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. Most species still saw humans as newcomers who were useful for support roles, but not much else. When asked about their contributions, Taman usually mentioned human adaptability and teamwork. The other species would nod politely and then move on to discuss more impressive capabilities. The debate continued for hours. Each species boasted about their greatest warriors and most advanced weapons. The Void Swarm was unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced before. These creatures did not just destroy planets or steal resources, they consumed entire worlds, leaving behind empty husks that drifted in space like dead shells. Even worse, they seemed to be learning and adapting with each attack. The situation grows more desperate each day, announced the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had founded the galactic government thousands of years ago. We need our greatest champions to lead specialized strike teams. Each species should prepare their finest warriors for immediate deployment. As the speaker finished talking, the chamber's main doors opened with a soft hiss. Every conversation stopped. The massive room fell completely silent. Even the constant humming of the station's life support systems seemed to quiet down. A figure walked through the doorway with smooth, flowing movements. He was tall and lean, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. His hair was black and his eyes were silver, like polished metal. But the most unsettling thing about him was how he moved. Each step was perfectly silent. His clothes seemed to shift and blur around the edges, as if he was not quite solid. Phantom, someone whispered. Taman had never seen one of the Phantom race in person before. He had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about the Phantoms. They were living legends, beings who could phase in and out of reality itself. They could walk through walls, become invisible, and move between dimensions. Most importantly, they were hunters, the greatest hunters in the known galaxy. This particular Phantom was named Hyunwoo, according to the identification that appeared on Taman's datapad. His reputation was terrifying even by Phantom standards. Intelligence reports said he had once tracked a Void Swarm nest across 3 star systems and destroyed it single-handedly. The nest had already consumed 3 inhabited planets. Hyunwoo had phased into the heart of their hive ship and eliminated every creature inside without taking a single wound. The various species representatives watched nervously as Hyunwoo walked across the chamber floor. His silver eyes scanned the room, studying each delegation with careful attention. The Chitauri delegate's mandibles twitched anxiously. The Luminos representative dimmed his natural glow. Even the proud Saurian hunter lowered his head slightly. Every species wanted Hyunwoo to join their forces. A single Phantom could change the outcome of entire battles. Having one on their side would be an incredible advantage. Taemin expected the hunter to approach one of the more powerful delegations. The Chithari had advanced technology and vast resources. The Lumenos Empire controlled dozens of star systems. The Saurians had the most experienced military commanders. Instead, Hyunwoo walked directly to the human table. Taemin blinked in surprise as the legendary hunter stopped in front of him. Up close, Hyunwoo's presence was even more intimidating. His silver eyes seemed to look right through Taemin, as if studying something beyond the physical world. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but perfectly clear. Commander Taemin of the Human Defense Corps, I formally request assignment to Squad Humanity. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives from every species began talking at once. Some sounded angry, others confused, and a few seemed almost offended. The Chithari delegate stood up so quickly that his chair fell over. This is unreasonable. The insect being clicked rapidly. The human forces are adequate for support roles, but surely a warrior of your caliber would be more effective with proper tactical coordination. Our hive mind can provide instantaneous battlefield updates. The Luminos representative pulsed brighter. The humans lack the energy weapons necessary to support phantom combat techniques. Our crystal technology would enhance your natural abilities. The Saurian hunter hissed louder. These humans are pack hunters at best. You need true predators who understand the art of the kill. Through all the noise and arguments, Hyunwoo remained perfectly still. His expression did not change. He did not even look at the other delegates who were desperately trying to convince him to reconsider. His silver eyes stayed focused on Taemin. Taemin felt sweat on his forehead despite the chamber's controlled temperature. He had led human forces in several successful operations against Void swarm scouts, but nothing that would attract this kind of attention. His squad was good, but they were not legendary warriors. They were just professional soldiers who worked well together. Why? Taemin asked finally. I mean no disrespect, but there are more experienced forces available, more advanced equipment, more impressive warriors. For the first time, Hyunwoo's expression changed slightly. The corner of his mouth moved in what might have been a smile, though it did not reach his eyes. I have studied the battle reports from all recent engagements with the Void Swarm, Hyunwoo said. Human forces consistently achieve results that exceed their apparent capabilities. This interests me. I wish to observe and understand how this is possible. The chamber fell quiet again. Even the other species representatives stopped arguing to listen. The idea that humans were somehow special or unusual was not something most of them had considered. Taemin looked around the room at all the staring faces, then back at the legendary hunter standing in front of him. Every instinct told him this was a terrible idea. Hyunwoo was far beyond anything his small squad was prepared to handle. They were used to working together as a team, not supporting a one-person army who could probably handle entire missions alone. But refusing a Phantom's request would be insulting and stupid. Besides, if Hyunwoo really could help them be more effective against the Void Swarm, then Taemin had a duty to accept. Very well, Taemin said, standing up and extending his hand. Welcome to Squad Humanity. Hyunwoo looked at the offered hand for a moment, as if he was not sure what to do with it. Then he reached out and shook it carefully. His skin was surprisingly warm. The chamber erupted in angry voices again, but Taemin barely heard them. He was too busy wondering what he had just gotten his squad into. The transport ship felt smaller with Hyunwoo aboard. Taemin watched his squad members try to act normal while the legendary Phantom sat quietly in the corner, studying them with those unsettling silver eyes. None of the humans were quite sure how to behave around someone who could phase through walls and had killed more Void Swarm creatures than entire military units. Sergeant Ji-ho was the first to break the awkward silence. The gruff veteran had been fighting aliens since before most of his squad mates were born. He walked over to Hyunwoo and sat down across from him without ceremony. So, Ji-ho said in his rough voice, you really want to work with us regular folks? No offense, but you could probably handle our missions alone and still have time for lunch. Hyunwoo tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to understand something puzzling. I am not interested in completing missions alone. I wish to observe how humans operate as a unit. Your methods are unusual. Corporal Minji snorted from where she was checking her explosives kit. She was a small woman with quick hands and an even quicker temper. Unusual? That's a nice way of saying we're not impressive compared to everyone else in the galaxy. Yeah, added Private Dong Hyun from his position at the computer console. The young tech specialist looked nervous, but curious. Most species think we're only good for support roles. We don't have natural weapons or special powers or anything like that. Private So Young looked up from cleaning her sniper rifle. She was the quietest member of the squad, but also the most observant. The other species representatives looked angry when you chose us. They probably think you made a mistake. Hyunwoo's expression remained neutral, but his silver eyes moved between each squad member as they spoke. It was like he was memorizing every detail about them. When he finally responded, his voice was carefully measured. I do not make mistakes in my choices, he said. I have spent considerable time reviewing combat reports from human engagements with the Void Swarm. Your success rates are statistically improbable given your individual capabilities. Jiho laughed, though it did not sound particularly happy. Improbable success rates, that's going on my tombstone. What the sergeant means, Taemin said quickly, is that we appreciate the vote of confidence. But we're curious about what you expect from this arrangement. We've worked together for 3 years. We know each other's strengths and weaknesses. Adding someone with your abilities changes everything. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his words were careful and precise. Among my people, I am considered an exceptional hunter. I have tracked prey across dimensions and eliminated threats that others could not even detect. But recently, I have begun to suspect that there are forms of hunting I do not understand. Minji raised an eyebrow. What kind of hunting? Your kind, Hyunwoo said simply. Phantom hunters work alone. We are taught that individual perfection is the highest form of predation, but humans consistently achieve victories through methods that should not work. I wish to understand these methods. The squad exchanged glances. They were used to being underestimated, but having someone actually study them was strange and uncomfortable. Well, Dong Hyun said hesitantly, maybe you could start by telling us what you can do? I mean, we know phantoms can phase through stuff, but the technical details might help us work better together. Hyunwoo nodded and stood up. Without warning, his body became translucent. The squad could see through him to the wall behind. Then he stepped sideways and disappeared completely, only to reappear on the other side of the cabin. I can shift between dimensions, he explained as his body became solid again. This allows me to move through physical barriers and become undetectable. I can also perceive multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, which makes it very difficult for enemies to hide from me. So Young whistled softly. That's incredibly useful for reconnaissance and infiltration. Indeed, Hyunwoo agreed. I can also extend this ability to objects I am touching, allowing me to transport equipment or weapons through solid barriers. My reaction time and movement speed are enhanced by my ability to briefly phase out of normal time flow. Jiho scratched his chin thoughtfully. Okay, that's all terrifying and impressive, but here's what I don't understand. If you can do all that, why do you need us? You could scout ahead, phase into enemy positions, eliminate targets, and phase out before anyone knew you were there. That is precisely the problem, Hyunwoo said. I have been hunting this way for decades. It is efficient, but it has also become predictable. The Void Swarm is unlike previous enemies. They adapt quickly. They learn from encounters. My traditional hunting methods may not be sufficient against them. The squad's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Taemin activated the display screen, revealing the face of Admiral Chen from Galactic Command. Commander Taemin, the Admiral said. Your squad has been assigned to investigate Research Station Prometheus 9. The station went dark 2 weeks ago. They were developing anti-swarm weapons, so this could be critical. Taemin nodded. Understood, sir. What kind of resistance should we expect? Unknown. The station is not responding to any communications. Long-range scans detect structural damage, but no signs of life. Could be equipment failure, could be something worse. Your job is to find out what happened and recover any useful research data. After the communication ended, the squad began preparing for the mission. It felt good to have something concrete to focus on instead of the awkward tension of getting to know their new teammate. Sounds like a standard reconnaissance operation, Jiho said, checking his weapons. We go in, sweep the station, gather intel, get out. Assuming it really is abandoned, Minji added, packing extra demolition charges. If something nasty killed the research team, it might still be hanging around. Dong Hyun was already reviewing the station's technical specifications. Prometheus 9 is a deep space research facility. Small crew, maybe 30 people. They were working on some kind of experimental weapon system designed to disrupt swarm neural networks. So Young studied the station's layout on her scope display. Multiple levels, lots of narrow corridors, good sight lines from the central hub, but plenty of hiding spots in the lab sections. Hyun-woo watched all of this preparation with obvious interest. He did not contribute to the planning, but his silver eyes tracked every movement and conversation. When Taemin asked if he had any suggestions, the Phantom shook his head. I prefer to observe your natural methods before offering input, he said. Please proceed as you normally would. As their ship approached the research station, Taemin looked out at the dark structure floating in space. Something about this mission felt different, and not just because of their new team member. The station looked wrong somehow. Its normally bright lights were dark, and several hull sections showed signs of damage. There, So Young said, pointing to a section of the station's outer hull. Those markings. They look like spiral patterns. Dong Yun enhanced the image on his scanner display. The patterns were definitely artificial, carved deep into the metal hull like some kind of twisted artwork. I've seen those before, Jiho said grimly. In the reports from planets that got hit by the Void Swarm, those are feeding marks. The squad fell silent as the implications sank in. This was not going to be a simple recovery mission. Yun Woo's expression did not change, but his body seemed to tense slightly. For the first time since joining them, he looked genuinely alert. It appears, he said quietly, that we will have an opportunity to test both of our hunting methods sooner than expected. The airlock hissed as squad humanity entered Research Station Prometheus 9. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the walls, and the air tasted of metal and something else that none of them wanted to identify. Taemin moved first, his weapon ready, followed by Jiho and the rest of the squad in their standard formation. Hyun-woo had vanished the moment they stepped aboard. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone, phased into another dimension, to scout ahead. Taemin tried not to feel abandoned. The Phantom had said he wanted to observe their natural methods, and apparently that meant leaving them to handle things alone while he watched from somewhere they could not see. Motion sensors are going crazy, Dong Hyun whispered, studying his handheld scanner. Something's moving in the station, but the readings don't make sense. It's like the signals are being scrambled. Void Swarm, Jiho muttered. They mess with electronic equipment, makes them harder to track. The squad moved through the station's main corridor, checking each room methodically. What they found was worse than anyone had expected. The research team had not just died, they had been harvested. Bodies lay scattered throughout the station, but they were wrong somehow. They looked like empty shells, drained of everything that had made them human. Their eyes were gone, replaced by dark holes that seemed to go deeper than they should. Their skin was pale and stretched tight over their bones, like leather that had been left in the sun too long. This is what the swarm does, So Young said quietly, kneeling next to one of the bodies. They don't just kill, They consume consciousness itself. These people are still technically alive, but everything that made them who they were is gone. Minji swore under her breath and turned away from the sight. How many? 27 so far, Taemin reported, checking his count. 3 crew members are still unaccounted for. They continued deeper into the station, following the spiral-shaped damage that marked the swarm's path through the hull. The patterns were beautiful in a horrible way, like artistic carvings that happened to be made of torn metal and shattered equipment. There, Dong-hyun pointed to his scanner. Multiple contacts in the main research lab. Big ones. The squad approached the lab carefully. Through the reinforced windows, they could see movement inside. Dark shapes flowed across the walls and ceiling like living shadows. But these shadows had too many teeth and too many grasping tentacles that writhed independently of any central body. How many do you count? Ji-ho asked. So young. She peered through her rifle scope, studying the creatures inside. At least 6, maybe more. They keep changing shape, so it's hard to get an accurate count. Standard swarm drones, Taemin identified. Nasty, but nothing we haven't handled before. The problem is that lab has only one entrance. We'll be walking into a kill zone. I can create a distraction, Minji suggested, hefting one of her explosive charges. Blow a hole in the far wall, make them think we're coming from multiple directions. Good idea, Ji-ho agreed. So young, can you get a clear shot from here? Not with all that equipment in the way, I need to get closer. They were developing their plan when Hyun-woo suddenly materialized next to them. The squad jumped in surprise. Even after seeing him phase before, it was still startling when he appeared without warning. There are 9 swarm creatures in the laboratory, he reported in his calm voice. 6 standard drones and 3 larger specimens. They are feeding on the station's power core and the remaining research data. Thanks for the intel, Taemin said. Can you help us coordinate an attack? Hyun-woo tilted his head in that puzzling way he had. I prefer to observe your methods first. Please proceed. Ji-ho gave the Phantom a hard look. You want to watch us fight for our lives instead of helping? I am here to learn, Hyun-woo said, simply. But I will intervene if your lives are truly threatened. The squad exchanged glances. Having a powerful ally who might or might not help was almost worse than fighting alone. But they had handled swarm creatures before, and complaining would not change anything. All right, Taemin decided. We do this the hard way. Minji, set. Charges on the wall opposite the main entrance. Dong-hyun, see if you can overload some of the lab equipment to create more distractions. So young. Find a position where you can provide covering fire. Ji-ho and I will take point through the main door when the charges blow. What about him? Minji asked, nodding toward Hyun-woo. He can do whatever he wants, Taemin said. We've got work to do. The squad split up to execute their plan. Minji moved to the far side of the lab and began placing explosive charges on the wall. Dong-hyun hacked into the station's control systems, preparing to overload the research equipment. Inside the lab, So-young found a position with good sight lines through the lab windows. Hyun-woo simply stood there and watched. But as the squad worked, something strange happened. His expression began to change. The cold, analytical look in his silver eyes was replaced by something that might have been curiosity or even surprise. Charges set, Minji reported through their communication system. Systems ready to overload, Dong-hyun confirmed. I have clear shots when the action starts, So-young added. On my mark, Taemin said, positioning himself next to the lab entrance with Ji-ho. 3, 2, 1. Mark! The explosion shook the entire station. Minji's charges blew a massive hole in the lab's far wall, and emergency alarms began wailing. At the same moment, Dong-hyun overloaded the research equipment, causing sparks and smoke to fill the air. The swarm creatures reacted immediately, but instead of panicking or scattering, They moved with coordinated purpose toward the new breach in the wall. That was when Taemin and Jiho burst through the main entrance, catching them from behind. So Young's rifle cracked repeatedly from her position, each shot finding its mark with precision that would have been impossible if she had been trying to hit randomly moving targets. But the creatures were not moving randomly. They were responding to the human attacks in predictable patterns, which So Young had already calculated. Dong-hyun's equipment overloads were not random either. He had carefully chosen which systems to destroy to create obstacles that would funnel the creatures into specific areas where the squad could engage them more effectively. Minji's explosion had not just created a distraction, it had also weakened the lab's structural supports in exactly the right places to bring down a section of ceiling onto 3 of the larger swarm creatures. Jiho and Taemin fought with brutal efficiency, but not recklessly. Every move was designed to support their teammates and protect each other. When one of them engaged a creature, the other was already positioning himself to help or to cover a retreat if necessary. Hyunwoo watched all of this with growing amazement. He had expected to see typical pack hunting behavior, similar to what he had observed in many other species, but this was different. These humans were not just working together. They were amplifying each other's abilities. When the last swarm creature fell, the squad regrouped without needing orders. They moved through the lab like they had done this 1,000 times before, checking for additional threats and securing the area. "Lab is clear," Jiho reported. "I've got the research data," Dong-hyun said, downloading files from the main computer. "No additional contacts on sensors," So Young confirmed. "Good work, everyone," Taemin said. Then he looked at Hyunwoo, who was staring at them with an expression that might have been wonder. "Well?" Taemin asked. "What did you think of our methods?" Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, less cold, more confused. "That was not pack hunting," he said slowly. "That was something else entirely. Something I do not have words for." The squad waited for him to explain, but Hyunwoo seemed lost in thought. He looked around the lab at the destroyed swarm creatures and the perfectly coordinated evidence of the squad's attack. "You did not simply work together," he said finally. "You made each other more than you were individually. How is this possible?" As they moved deeper into Research Station Prometheus 9, Hyunwoo continued to study the humans with increasing fascination. He phased in and out of visibility, sometimes scouting ahead, sometimes watching from impossible angles as the squad cleared each section of the station. What he observed challenged everything he had been taught about hunting and survival. When Dong-hyun encountered a sealed blast door, he did not simply try to force it open or ask for help. Instead, he immediately began analyzing the locking mechanism. While Minji moved to position explosives as backup, Jiho established a defensive perimeter, and So Young found an overwatch position. They did all of this without discussing it, as if they could read each other's minds. "The lock system is damaged," Dong-hyun reported, his fingers flying over his portable hacking device. "Swarm-feeding tendrils fried the main circuits, but I can reroute power through the secondary systems." "How long?" Taemin asked, keeping watch for more creatures. 3 minutes, maybe 4. "Take your time," Jiho said calmly. "We've got you covered." Hyunwoo marveled at this exchange. Among phantoms, if one hunter encountered an obstacle, he would overcome it alone or find another path. The idea of standing guard while a teammate worked, of willingly making oneself vulnerable to protect another's success, was completely foreign to him. The blast door opened with a grinding sound of damaged machinery. Beyond it lay the station's central research laboratory, and what they found there made everyone stop in shock. The lab was enormous, filled with complex equipment that hummed with barely contained energy. But dominating the center of the room was something that should not have existed. A massive creature, easily the size of a small spacecraft, hung suspended in a web of feeding tendrils that connected to every surface of the room. Its body pulsed with dark energy and dozens of smaller creatures moved around it like servants attending a queen. "Brood mother," So Young whispered. Hyunwoo had heard of these creatures but never seen one. They were the reproductive centers of swarm nests, massive beings that could birth hundreds of new creatures and coordinate entire invasion forces. Most military units avoided them entirely. Even full companies of soldiers rarely survived encounters with brood mothers. "That thing is feeding on the station's main power core," Dong-hyun observed, studying his scanner readings. "It's also connected to the research computers. It's literally consuming all the anti-swarm weapon data." "We have to stop it," Taemin said grimly. "If it finishes processing that research, the swarm will know how to counter every weapon we're developing." "How exactly do we fight something that big?" Minji asked, though she was already pulling explosive charges from her pack. Hyunwoo expected them to retreat and call for backup. Fighting a brood mother with only 5 people was not just dangerous, it was suicidal. Even he would hesitate to engage such a creature alone. But instead of backing away, the humans began planning an attack. "The power connections," Ji-ho said, pointing to the thick cables that fed energy to the creature. "If we can cut those, it might weaken the thing." "The research computers are over there," Dong-hyun added. "If I can get to the main terminal, I might be able to corrupt the data before it finishes downloading." "I count at least 20 smaller creatures around the big one," So Young reported, studying the room through her scope. "They'll swarm us the moment we enter." "Then we don't give them the chance," Minji said with a grin that was mostly teeth. "I've got enough explosives to bring down half this station. We go in fast, hit multiple targets at once, and get out before they know what happened." Hyunwoo watched this planning session with growing amazement. These humans were not just brave or foolish. They were systematically analyzing an impossible situation and finding ways to turn their weaknesses into advantages. "Hyunwoo," Taemin said suddenly, "we could use your help with this one. Can you phase into the room and take out some of the smaller creatures before we move in?" The Phantom considered the request. He could indeed eliminate several of the drone creatures before they realized he was there, but doing so would end his observation of pure human tactics. He was learning something important about how these people fought, and he did not want to contaminate the experiment. "I will provide support if absolutely necessary," he said carefully, "but I would prefer to see how you handle this challenge, with your existing capabilities." The squad exchanged looks that were not entirely friendly. Here they were, planning to fight a creature that could kill them all, and their most powerful ally wanted to watch instead of help. "Your choice," Ji-ho said bluntly. "Just remember that if we all die, your observation experiment ends pretty quick." They spent several more minutes refining their plan. Minji would create a diversion by blowing up some of the power cables on the far side of the room. So Young would provide covering fire from the entrance, while Dong-hyun made a dash for the research terminal. Ji-ho and Tae-min would engage the smaller creatures to keep them away from Dong-hyun. It was a desperate plan with very little chance of success. But as Hyunwoo watched them prepare, he began to understand something that had been puzzling him. These humans were not trying to win through superior strength or speed or technology. They were trying to win by making the fight about something other than raw power. "Everyone ready?" Taemin asked. They nodded, checking their weapons one final time. Hyunwoo positioned himself where he could observe from multiple dimensional angles while remaining undetected. "Go," Taemin ordered. The battle that followed was unlike anything Hyunwoo had ever witnessed. Minji's explosions sent chunks of machinery flying through the air, but she had positioned the charges to create barriers and obstacles as much as damage. The falling debris forced the smaller swarm creatures into predictable movement patterns. So Young's covering fire was not random suppression. Every shot was calculated to herd the creatures toward areas where Ji-ho and Tae-min could engage them most effectively. She was not just killing enemies, she was controlling the battlefield. Dong-hyun's run to the computer terminal looked suicidal, but it was actually carefully planned. His route took him through areas that So-young had already cleared with her rifle, behind cover that Min-ji's explosions had created, and along paths that Ji-ho and Tae-min had established by drawing enemy attention elsewhere. The broodmother itself began to move, its massive bulk shifting as it realized it was under attack. Feeding tendrils lashed out like whips, each one capable of crushing a human instantly. But the squad had anticipated this. They had positioned themselves so that the creature's own attacks created more cover and obstacles for them to use. Then something went wrong. One of Dong-hyun's explosive devices malfunctioned, detonating early and sending him sprawling across the floor. A pack of swarm drones immediately changed direction to attack the vulnerable human. So-young was already engaging other targets and could not shift her aim fast enough to help. Min-ji saw the danger and made a split-second decision. That horrified Hyunwoo. Instead of seeking cover or trying to save herself, she threw herself directly into the path of the attacking creatures. Her body was torn by claws and teeth, but her sacrifice gave Dong-hyun time to reach the terminal. "Downloads corrupted," Dong-hyun shouted as his fingers flew over the keyboard. "The data is useless now." "Everyone out," Tae-min ordered, but Min-ji was not moving. She lay in a growing pool of blood, her breathing shallow and rapid. Ji-ho immediately moved to help the wounded soldier, putting himself directly in harm's way. So-young adjusted her position to cover his rescue attempt, exposing herself to return fire from the smaller creatures. Tae-min provided suppression fire while slowly retreating toward the exit. They were going to die, all of them. The mathematics of the situation were clear to Hyunwoo's analytical mind. There were too many enemies, too much distance to cover, and one of their team was critically wounded. But instead of abandoning Min-ji or panicking, they fought harder. They moved with desperate coordination, each person risking everything to protect the others. Dong-hyun grabbed a damaged power cable and electrified a section of floor, creating a barrier between them and pursuing creatures. So-young used her last few shots to bring down a section of ceiling that blocked the broodmother's reaching tendrils. Ji-ho carried Min-ji while Tae-min covered their retreat with steady, accurate fire. For the first time in his existence, Hyunwoo felt something he did not have words for. These humans were not just hunting together. They were willing to die for each other. They made each other not just more capable, but more than they could be alone. The Phantom made a decision that surprised him as much as it would have surprised anyone who knew his people. He stopped observing and started helping. Hyunwoo materialized directly in front of the charging swarm creatures with such sudden violence that reality itself seemed to crack around him. His weapons, forged from crystallized dimensional energy, cut through the alien bodies like they were made of smoke. But instead of finishing the fight with overwhelming force, he moved to support the human retreat. He phased through solid matter to appear next to Ji-ho, who was struggling to carry the wounded Min-ji while fighting off smaller creatures. Without a word, Hyunwoo lifted the injured woman and began moving toward the exit with impossible speed. But he did not simply teleport them to safety. Instead, he stayed with the squad, matching their pace, covering their retreat. "The power core!" Dong-hyun shouted over the noise of battle. "If we don't destroy it, the broodmother will just regrow everything we damaged." Tae-min looked back at the massive creature, which was already beginning to heal itself using energy drawn from the station's main reactor. The logical thing to do was escape while they could. They had completed their mission by corrupting the research data. Staying to fight the broodmother was unnecessary risk, but Hyunwoo saw something different in the commander's eyes. Tae-min was not thinking about logical choices or acceptable losses. He was thinking about all the people who would die if this creature was allowed to mature and spawn more of its kind. "I can get you to the power core," Hyunwoo said suddenly. The words surprised him as much as they surprised the humans. "If you are willing to trust me." "What do you mean?" Tae-min asked. I can phase the entire squad through the station's structure directly to the reactor chamber. But the process will temporarily drain most of my abilities. I will be vulnerable for several minutes afterward. The squad exchanged glances. They had known Hyan-Woo for less than a day, and now he was offering to risk himself for their mission. Why? So Young asked bluntly. You've been studying us this whole time. Why help now? Hyun-Woo looked down at Minji, who was breathing weakly in his arms. Her eyes were open, and she was looking at him with a mixture of pain and curiosity. Because, he said slowly, I think I am beginning to understand what you do differently, and I want to be part of it. Jiho grinned despite their desperate situation. Welcome to the squad, then. Let's go blow up a power core. What happened next was unlike anything Hyun-Woo had ever experienced. He extended his phasing ability to encompass all 5 humans, pulling them into the dimensional space between realities. But instead of feeling drained by the effort, he felt supported. Their combined will and determination somehow strengthened his own abilities. They emerged in the station's reactor chamber, a massive space filled with humming machinery and dangerous radiation. The brood mother's feeding tendrils had grown throughout the room like a cancer, tapping directly into the station's power source. Hyun-Woo staggered as the phasing effort took its toll. His silver eyes dimmed, and his naturally pale skin became almost transparent. For the first time since the humans had met him, he looked mortal. How long until your abilities return? Taemin asked, helping steady the weakened phantom. Unknown, Hyun-Woo admitted. Perhaps several hours, perhaps longer. Then we do this the hard way, Jiho said, checking his remaining ammunition. Dong-hyun, how do we overload this thing? The young tech specialist was already studying the reactor controls. It's designed with multiple safety systems to prevent overload. But if we can damage the primary cooling system and disable the emergency shutoffs. I can handle the cooling system, Minji said weakly from where Hyun-Woo had carefully placed her against a wall. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alert. Just need someone to carry me over there. Absolutely not, Taemin said firmly. You've lost too much blood. You need medical attention, not more combat. Minji tried to sit up and winced in pain. Commander, with respect, I'm the only one here who knows enough about explosive devices to safely breach a reactor cooling system without killing us all. Unless you want to guess and hope for the best? Hyun-Woo found himself impressed again by these humans. Even critically wounded, Minji was thinking about the mission and her teammates' safety. But more than that, the others were listening to her expertise despite her condition. They were not dismissing her because she was hurt. I will carry her, Hyun-Woo said, and I will protect her while she works. But you're powerless right now, So Young pointed out. You're as vulnerable as any of us. Then I will fight as any of you would fight, Hyun-Woo replied. It was a strange thought, but not an unpleasant one. They split up to complete their tasks. Dong-hyun began hacking the reactor's safety systems, while So Young and Jiho established defensive positions around the room. Taemin coordinated their efforts while monitoring for signs that the brood mother had detected their presence. Hyun-Woo carried Minji to the cooling system junction, moving carefully to avoid jarring her injuries. As she worked to place explosive charges in precisely the right locations, he stood guard with a human-made weapon that felt clumsy in his hands. You know, Minji said quietly as she rigged the charges, I don't think you came here just to study our tactics. What do you mean? Hyun-Woo asked, scanning the corridors for approaching enemies. Phantoms are supposed to be perfect hunters, right? You don't need to learn anything from humans. We're not exactly the galaxy's most impressive species. Hyun-Woo considered her words while she worked. Perhaps that is precisely why I needed to learn from you. Because we're not impressive. Because you have found ways to be more than what you appear to be. My people have become stagnant. We are so individually capable that we have stopped growing, stopped adapting. Minji secured the last charge and looked up at him. "And you think working with us will make you grow?" Before Hyunwoo could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the reactor chamber. The broodmother had finally detected. Their presence and its smaller creatures were pouring through the access corridors like a living tide. "Charges set," Minji reported. "Safety systems disabled," Dong-hyun added from across the room. "Everyone to the exit," Taemin ordered. But there were too many creatures between them and the escape route. Dozens of swarm drones filled the corridors, their twisted forms writhing with alien hunger. Behind them, the massive bulk of the brood mother itself was forcing its way into the reactor chamber. Hyunwoo found himself in the middle of his first truly desperate fight as an ordinary soldier instead of a supernatural hunter. His movements were still fast and precise, but he could not phase through attacks or disappear when overwhelmed. He had to rely on positioning, teamwork, and the strange human weapons he had never used before. It was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. When a group of creatures tried to flank their position, Ji-ho was already there to intercept them. When Hyunwoo's unfamiliar weapon jammed, So Young provided covering fire without being asked. When he made a tactical mistake that left him exposed, Taemin immediately moved to support him. For the first time in his existence, Hyunwoo was not hunting alone. He was part of something larger and more complex than individual predation. He was part of a pack that made each member stronger than they could ever be on their own. The reactor began to overload as Minji's charges destroyed the cooling system. Warning lights flashed red, and the temperature in the chamber started to rise rapidly. 30 seconds until critical overload, Dong-hyun warned. They fought their way toward the exit as emergency systems screamed warnings about imminent reactor failure. The broodmother realized what was happening and began retreating, but it was too late. The massive creature was too large to escape quickly, and the explosion would destroy it along with the station. As they reached the final corridor, leading to their ship, Hyunwoo felt his abilities beginning to return. But instead of immediately phasing away to safety, he stayed with the squad, matching their pace, ensuring everyone made it out together. They barely reached their transport before the reactor exploded, taking the research station and the broodmother. With it, in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from several star systems away. As their ship flew away from the destruction, Hyunwoo sat quietly among the humans, thinking about what he had experienced. He had lost his powers, fought as a mortal, and trusted his life to teammates he barely knew. He had never felt more alive. 3 days later, as Minji recovered in the medical bay and the squad rested between missions, the emergency alert came through every communication channel simultaneously. The message was brief and terrifying. New Sol Colony was under attack by the largest void swarm force ever recorded. Taemin stood in the briefing room with his squad, watching the tactical display that showed the scope of the disaster. New Sol was a mining colony on the edge of human space, home to 50,000 civilians, including many families with children. The attacking swarm force included 3 broodmothers and hundreds of support creatures. Every available ship is being sent to New Sol, Admiral Chen explained over the communication link. But even at maximum speed, the fastest vessels won't arrive for 6 hours. The colony's defenses are already failing. Hyunwoo studied the tactical data with growing concern. His abilities had fully returned after the reactor incident, but even he could not travel that distance quickly. Space was vast, and even phantom. Technology had limits when it came to long-range transportation. "Wait," So Young said suddenly. "Hyunwoo, you said you can phase through dimensions, right? Does that include the space between star systems?" The Phantom nodded slowly. "I can traverse dimensional barriers to travel great distances instantaneously, but such efforts are extremely taxing. The farther the distance, the greater the cost." "What kind of cost?" Taemin asked. Hyunwoo was quiet for a moment, calculating possibilities he had never seriously considered before. "To transport myself, and 4 others across 12 light-years of space, it would drain my abilities completely for several days. I would be as powerless as any human for an extended period. The squad exchanged glances. They had seen how vulnerable Hyun-woo was without his supernatural abilities. Asking him to strand himself that way in the middle of a massive battle was essentially asking him to commit suicide. How long could the colony hold out on its own? Ji-ho asked. Admiral Chen's expression was grim. Based on previous swarm attacks of this scale, perhaps 2 hours. Maybe 3 if they're lucky. And you said the nearest reinforcements are 6 hours away? At minimum. The mathematics were simple and horrible. By the time help arrived, New Seoul would be another dead colony, its population consumed by the void swarm. There might be another way, Dong-hyun said hesitantly. The colony has mining equipment, right? Industrial machinery designed for breaking up asteroids and processing raw materials? Yes, the Admiral confirmed. It's a major mining operation. Why? Because mining equipment can be turned into weapons if you know what you're doing. Heavy excavators become mobile artillery, explosive charges for breaking rocks become improvised bombs, or processing facilities can be converted into defensive fortifications. Taemin began to see where his tech specialist was going with this. You're talking about turning the entire colony into a fortress. More than that, Dong-hyun continued, we turn it into a trap. The swarm expects to find helpless civilians. Instead, they find an organized defense that uses their own tactics against them. It would still require someone with tactical knowledge to coordinate the defense, So Young pointed out. The colonists are miners and engineers, not soldiers. That's where we come in, Minji said from the doorway of the medical bay. She was pale and moving slowly, but she was on her feet and armed. If Hyun-woo can get us there, we can organize the colonists and hold out until the cavalry arrives. Absolutely not, Taemin said firmly. You're still recovering from serious injuries. You belong in a hospital, not a combat zone. Minji glared at him with the stubborn expression they all knew meant she had made up her mind about something. Commander, there are kids on that colony, families. I've seen what the swarm does to people. If you think I'm going to lie in a medical bed while children get harvested, you don't know me very well. Hyun-woo watched this exchange with fascination. These humans were volunteering for a mission that was almost certainly suicidal. Even if he could transport them to New Seoul instantly, they would be 5 people against a swarm force that included 3 broodmothers. The logical choice was to evacuate what civilians they could and write off the colony as a loss. But logic did not seem to be driving their decision-making process. We could do it, Ji-ho said thoughtfully. Not win a conventional battle, but hold out long enough for reinforcements. Turn the mining operation into a guerrilla war that the swarm isn't prepared for. The colonists would have to trust us completely, So Young added. Follow orders from strangers, abandon their homes to take defensive positions, risk everything on our plan. They will, Taemin said with quiet confidence, because the alternative is watching their families die. Hyun-woo found himself speaking before he had consciously decided to. I will do it. I will transport all of you to New Seoul immediately. The squad turned to look at him in surprise. But you'll be powerless for days, Dong-hyun protested. In the middle of the biggest swarm attack ever recorded. That's insane. Perhaps, Hyun-woo agreed. But I have learned something important over the past few days. Individual power is not the only form of strength. If I am going to be powerless, there is no group I would rather be powerless with than this one. Minji grinned despite her injuries. Look at that. Our legendary hunter is starting to sound human. The transportation process was unlike anything the squad had experienced before. Hyun-woo pulled them into the space between dimensions, where reality became fluid and distance lost its meaning. For a few terrifying seconds, they existed nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Then they materialized in the main square of New Seoul Colony, just as the first swarm creatures began their assault on the outer perimeter. Hyun-woo immediately collapsed to his knees. His silver eyes dulled and his skin pale. The dimensional jump had drained him completely. For the next several days, he would be as mortal as any human, "Well," he said weakly, accepting Taemin's help to stand, "this should be interesting." Around them, the colony was in chaos. Civilians ran in panic as warning sirens wailed. In the distance, they could see the dark shapes of swarm creatures pouring through breaches in the outer defensive wall. "All right, people," Taemin said, checking his weapons. "We've got about 50,000 scared civilians, some mining equipment, and 5 soldiers to hold off the largest void swarm attack in galactic history. Time to show them what humans can do when they work together." Hyun-woo felt a strange sensation that it took him a moment to identify. Despite being powerless and facing impossible odds, he was not afraid. For the first time in his existence, he was exactly where he belonged. He was part of the pack now, and the pack was going hunting. The first hour was pure chaos. Swarm creatures poured through the breached outer walls of New Seoul Colony like a living tide of darkness. The colonists, mostly miners and their families, ran in panic as their defensive systems failed one by one. In the distance, 3 massive broodmothers could be seen coordinating the attack, their alien intelligence directing the smaller creatures with terrifying efficiency. Taemin grabbed the colony's communication system and broadcast on all channels. "This is Commander Taemin of the Human Defense Corps. All civilians report to designated rally points immediately. We're not evacuating. We're fighting back." The response was immediate and predictable. Dozens of frightened voices filled the communication channels, all asking the same questions. How could they fight? They were just miners. They had families to protect. This was hopeless. Hyun-woo, still weak from the dimensional jump, watched as the squad split up to handle the crisis. Each human moved with purpose and confidence, despite facing odds that would have made even veteran soldiers hesitate. Ji-ho took control of the colony's security forces, a small group of guards who were trained to handle mining accidents and labor disputes, not alien invasions. "Listen up," he barked over their panicked radio chatter. "Stop thinking like security guards and start thinking like soldiers. We're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to make this so expensive for the swarm that they'll regret coming. Here." So Young had found the colony's highest observation tower and was already providing sniper support to evacuating civilians. Her rifle cracked repeatedly, each shot dropping a swarm creature that was getting too close to fleeing families. But more importantly, she was gathering intelligence about enemy movements and relaying it to the others. Minji, despite her injuries, had commandeered a group of mining engineers and was rapidly converting industrial equipment into weapons. Heavy excavators became mobile artillery platforms. Ore haulers were converted into armored personnel carriers. Explosive charges meant for breaking up asteroids were rigged as improvised mines. Dong-hyun had connected himself to the colony's central computer system and was turning the entire mining operation into a defensive network. Environmental controls became early warning systems. Mining tunnels were sealed or opened to channel enemy movements. Even the waste processing systems were modified to create toxic barriers. And through it all, Taemin moved between groups, coordinating their efforts and making split-second decisions about resource allocation and tactical priorities. He was not just commanding the defense. He was teaching the colonists to think like a military unit. Hyun-woo found himself assigned to help with civilian evacuation, a task that would have been beneath his notice just days earlier. But as he guided families towards secure areas and helped carry supplies, he began to understand something fundamental about human pack behavior. These people were not just cooperating, they were changing each other. A middle-aged miner named Park, who had been paralyzed with fear an hour earlier, was now efficiently organizing supply distribution. A young engineer named Lee, who had wanted to surrender immediately, was rigging defensive barriers with deadly precision. Even the children were helping, carrying messages between groups and spotting enemy movements. The humans were not just adapting to the crisis. They were adapting each other. The main swarm force is regrouping, So Young reported over the communication system. They're bringing up the brood mothers for a coordinated assault on the central complex. How long do we have? Taemin asked. Maybe 20 minutes before they're in position. That was when Hyun-woo realized what the humans were actually doing. They were not trying to defeat the swarm through superior firepower or defensive fortifications. They were turning the entire colony into a reflection of themselves, a place where individual strengths were amplified by collective cooperation. "The mining tunnels," he said suddenly, the idea forming as he spoke. "We can use them like blood vessels in a body. Move resources and people instantly between any 2 points in the colony." Dong-hyun looked up from his computer console. "That's brilliant. But we'd need someone to coordinate movement between dozens of different tunnel sections. The logistics would be insane." "Not for a phantom," Hyun-woo replied. "Even without my phasing abilities, I can perceive dimensional overlays. I can see the tunnel system as a 3-dimensional map and coordinate movements through it." It was the first time since losing his powers that Hyun-woo had found a way to contribute something uniquely valuable. But more than that, it was the first time he had found a way to use his abilities not to dominate a situation, but to support others. The defense of New Seoul became something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Instead of static fortifications or conventional military tactics, the colonists fought like a single organism with thousands of specialized parts. When swarm creatures broke through one section of the perimeter, Ji-ho's security teams did not try to hold ground. Instead, they fell back through the tunnel system, while Min-ji's mining crews collapsed the area behind them with controlled explosions. The attackers found themselves trapped in dead-end chambers, while defenders emerged from unexpected positions to attack their flanks. So Young's sniper fire was not just suppression. Every shot was calculated to herd swarm creatures toward areas where the colonists had prepared ambushes. Her bullets guided enemy movements like a shepherd directing livestock. Dong-hyun's computer systems did not just provide information. They actively manipulated the environment to create advantages. Lighting systems were used to blind attacking creatures. Atmospheric controls created pockets of toxic gas. Even the colony's artificial gravity was adjusted to throw off enemy coordination. The broodmothers, used to overwhelming resistance through sheer numbers and coordination, found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. The entire colony fought as a single entity, but one that was infinitely more complex and adaptable than their own hive mind structure. When the first broodmother tried to force its way into the central complex, it found every corridor filled with obstacles that had not been there minutes earlier. Mining equipment blocked passages. Explosive charges were triggered in perfect sequence to damage but not destroy critical structures, and defenders appeared from directions that should have been impossible. The creature's smaller servants, bred for simple coordination, could not adapt to the constantly changing battlefield. They were outmaneuvered by civilians who had been terrified miners just hours earlier, but were now thinking and fighting like professional soldiers. Second broodmother is trying to flank through the residential sector, So Young reported. "Already. On it," Min-ji replied. "I've got a welcoming committee of angry parents with mining charges waiting for them." Hyun-woo coordinated movement through the tunnel system, his enhanced perception allowing him to track dozens of groups simultaneously. But what amazed him was how little coordination was actually needed. The colonists were beginning to anticipate each other's needs and responses. They were becoming a true pack. "Third broodmother is pulling back," Ji-ho announced. "I think they're regrouping for a final assault." "How much time until reinforcements arrive?" Taemin asked. Dong-hyun checked his communications array. 3 hours, maybe less. The galactic fleet is burning their engines to get here faster. 3 hours. They had already held out for 2 hours against impossible odds. But the hardest part was still ahead. The swarm would throw everything at them in one final attack, trying to overwhelm the defense before help could arrive. But as Hyun-woo looked around at the determined faces of the colonists, he realized something important. These humans were not just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to protect each other. and that made them more dangerous than any conventional military force. The pack was ready for the final hunt. 6 months after the defense of New Seoul, Hyun-woo stood in the crystalline halls of the Phantom Council chambers, deep within the dimensional space his people called home. The Council of Elders, 12 ancient beings whose mastery of interdimensional travel was legendary even among phantoms, regarded him with expressions that mixed confusion with concern. "You have changed," said Elder Kiran, her voice echoing from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Your hunting patterns are no longer recognizable as phantom methodology." Hyun-woo nodded calmly. He had expected this conversation since returning to report on his experiences with the humans. "I have learned new ways of hunting. More effective ways? More effective?" Elder Zeth's form flickered with displeasure. "You spent months weakened, vulnerable, dependent on lesser beings for survival. How can this be considered an improvement?" The youngest member of the council, Elder Vex, leaned forward with curiosity. "Tell us about this human pack behavior. You mentioned in your reports. What makes their methods so different from standard predation techniques?" Hyun-woo considered how to explain something that had taken him months to understand. "When phantoms hunt, we rely on individual superiority. Our abilities make us more capable than our prey, so we overwhelm them through superior strength, speed, and perception. This works well against most enemies, but not against the Void Swarm," Elder Kiran observed. "Correct. The swarm adapts quickly to individual threats. They learn to counter superior abilities through numbers and coordination. Traditional phantom hunting becomes less effective with each engagement." "And you believe human methods offer a solution to this problem?" Elder Zeth asked skeptically. "I do not believe it. I have proven it." Hyun-woo activated a holographic display that showed the final statistics from the New Seoul defense. 5. Humans and 50,000 civilians held off a swarm force that included 3 brood mothers and hundreds of support creatures. They did this for over 5 hours with minimal casualties. The council studied the data in silence. Elder Vex was the first to speak. "These numbers seem impossible. How did they achieve such results?" "By hunting as a true pack," Hyun-woo explained. "Humans do not rely on individual superiority. Instead, they amplify each other's abilities through cooperation. When they work together, the whole becomes far greater than the sum of its parts. Cooperation is not unknown among intelligent species," Elder Zeth pointed out. "Many races coordinate their efforts during combat." "This was different," Hyun-woo insisted. "Other species coordinate by having individuals perform specialized roles within a larger plan. Humans do something more complex. They adapt their very nature to enhance their teammates. They become what their pack needs them to be." He activated another display showing tactical analyses from several recent battles. "Watch how they fight. The sniper does not just provide covering fire. She guides enemy movements to create opportunities for her teammates. The explosives expert does not just destroy targets. She shapes the battlefield to amplify her team's advantages. The technician does not just gather information. He turns the environment itself into a weapon." Elder Kiran studied the combat footage with growing interest. "And you participated in this pack behavior yourself?" "I did, and it changed me." Hyun-woo paused, searching for words to describe an experience that had no equivalent in phantom culture. "When I lost my abilities during the dimensional transport to New Seoul, I expected to become a liability to the team. Instead, I found new ways to contribute. They helped me discover capabilities I never knew I possessed." "What kind of capabilities?" Elder Vex asked. "Coordination, support, the ability to make others more effective rather than simply being effective myself." Hyun-woo activated a final display showing his performance metrics before and after joining Squad Humanity. "My individual kill counts have decreased, but our overall mission success rate has increased by 40%. The council exchanged glances that communicated volumes through dimensional resonance. Elder Zeth spoke for all of them. You are suggesting that we abandon millions of years of evolutionary development to adopt the methods of a species that has been spacefaring for less than a century. I am suggesting that evolution does not always mean becoming individually stronger, Hyunwoo replied. Sometimes it means learning to become collectively unstoppable. The debate that followed lasted for hours. The elders questioned every aspect of Hyunwoo's experiences, analyzing combat footage and mission reports with scientific precision. Some were intrigued by the potential applications of human pack tactics. Others were horrified by the idea of phantoms becoming dependent on lesser beings. Finally, Elder Kiran called for silence. Hyunwoo, you understand that what you are proposing would fundamentally change our species? If we adopt these human methods, we would no longer be the same kind of beings we have been for millennia. Yes, Hyunwoo said simply, and I believe that change is necessary for our survival. Why? Because the galaxy is changing. The void. Swarm represents a new kind of threat that individual excellence cannot defeat. Other species are beginning to understand this as well. The Chitauri have started forming mixed-species tactical units. The Luminos Empire is experimenting with human-style coordination techniques. Even the Saurians are requesting human advisors for their military operations. He gestured to a galactic map that showed recent swarm activities. If we continue to hunt alone while other species learn to hunt together, we will become increasingly irrelevant. Eventually, we will become extinct. The council was quiet for a long time. When Elder Vex finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. What exactly are you proposing? Allow me to return to squad humanity. Let me continue learning human pack tactics while teaching them advanced phantom techniques. Create a new model of cooperation that combines our individual abilities with their collective amplification methods. And if this experiment fails? Hyunwoo thought about Taimin's steady leadership, Jiho's gruff loyalty, Minji's fierce determination, So-young's quiet competence, and Dong-hyun's innovative thinking. He thought about the colonists of New Seoul, who had transformed from terrified civilians into an unstoppable defensive force in a matter of hours. It will not fail, he said with quiet confidence. I have seen what humans can accomplish when they work together. More importantly, I have experienced what I can accomplish when I work with them. We do not make each other weaker. We make each other into something greater than we ever could be alone. The council's decision was not unanimous, but it was definitive. Hyunwoo would be allowed to continue his experiment, but he would not be alone. Other young phantoms would be assigned to human units across the galaxy. Mixed-species pack squads would be formed to test the effectiveness of combined human-alien tactics. 3 weeks later, Hyunwoo materialized aboard the transport ship carrying Squad Humanity to their next mission. The humans looked up as he appeared, and Taemin smiled in welcome. How did it go with your people? The commander asked. They have agreed to try a new approach to hunting, Hyunwoo replied, settling into his usual position with the squad. They are forming additional mixed-species units based on our success. Look at that, Minji said with a grin. We're trendsetters, Jiho snorted. About time the rest of the galaxy figured out what we've known all along. What's that? So-young asked. That humans don't make the best individual soldiers, Jiho replied. But we make everybody else better at being soldiers. Dong-hyun looked up from his tactical display, which showed their next target, a heavily fortified swarm stronghold that had resisted all previous attacks. Speaking of making each other better, we've got a big one coming up. Intelligence says this nest has been adapting to every tactic the Galactic Fleet has tried. Hyunwoo studied the mission briefing with interest. 6 months ago, he would have approached this as a challenge to overcome through superior individual ability. Now he found himself thinking about how the squad's different strengths could be combined to create new tactical possibilities. They have not adapted to our tactics, he said with something that might have been anticipation. Because no one has used our tactics before. Taemin activated the mission planning display. All right, people, let's show them what a real pack can do. As the squad began developing their strategy, Hyunwoo reflected on how much had changed since that first day. In the Galactic Council chambers, he had come to study humanity's deadliest hunters, expecting to observe some kind of exotic predation technique that he could add to his own capabilities. Instead, he had discovered that humanity's deadliest hunter was not an individual at all. It was the pack. And now, he was not just observing the pack. He had become an integral part of it. The thought of returning to solitary hunting seemed not just ineffective now, but lonely. He had learned to be something he never knew was possible, not just deadly, but part of something that made others deadly as well. In the distance, their target awaited. The swarm stronghold that had defeated every previous assault was about to learn what happened when it faced an enemy that fought not as individuals, but as something greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy's most dangerous pack was going hunting, and they were bringing new friends along for the lesson.